Lynn Middleton had very set views. He was a very outspoken South African. He had been a Buccaneer pilot. Before that, he was a Seahawk pilot, and he had taken part in Suez. And when we showed him our plan for the airfield, he said, no, I want bombs on the runway. And we said, there's no point. And this attack gets everyone through in we hope, relative safety at 3-second intervals. And he said, I want 1,000-pound bombs. And I said, well, you can't put 1,000-pound bombs on the runway from low level and do any damage. He said, do what we did in Suez. We went in close formation at low level, and the leader said, pickle now. It's not going to work, sir. That was just the first instance, actually. There was another time when the ships in the Sound were screaming out for combat air patrol when they were getting hammered after the landings. And Lynn Middleton had insisted on keeping a couple of Harriers with 1,000-pound bombs on at the back of the deck in case the Argentine carrier came within striking range. And we sent Fred Fredrickson, actually, my good mate, was sent out by helicopter to go around the warships in the Sound to find out what we could do to help knock out the raids before they got there. And Fred came back and reported to the captain. And Lynn Middleton said, okay, Fred, what do the boys want? And Fred said, they say, send more caps, sir. And Lynn said, well, we've got to keep 2 aircraft back with bombs on in case the 25th of May comes over the horizon. And he said, anyway, his son was a helicopter pilot on one of the frigates. He said, did you see my son? And Fred said, yes, sir, I did. He said, what did he have a message for me? He said, yes, it send more fucking cap.
Get to the point then where you can, I mean, I don't know anything about the military. I've not been in the military. There's obviously chain of command, and you can't go around lying. But do you get to the point where you try and sort of not advertise what it is you're doing, or you try to use sneaky methods to get away with doing what you want to do, even though you've been told to do something else? We
were lucky in that Commander Air Wings was a really good guy, and he fought our corner very hard with the captain. And it was actually rare that we were constrained. Just 1 or 2 instances like that. But the captain actually was hardly seen during the conflict by the ship's company. The commander, John Locke, basically ran the ship and made all the broadcasts. I don't think the captain came on the broadcast during the conflict at all.
He was too busy, or he was just, he sort of delegated that?
Yeah, he delegated it to John Locke, but it would have been, I think, great for morale if the captain could come on the broadcast and give the odd chuck up.
The other thing that obviously stands out in that first mission is the low fly aspect. And of course, the RAF certainly has a reputation, or did have a reputation, for being masters in that particular domain.
100 feet was the minimum that they allowed people to be authorized down to in the Air Force. It was normally 250 feet, and if you did a workup, you could go down to 100 feet. In peacetime in the Navy, I authorized my junior guys down to 50 feet. Below 50 feet, you're on your own, really.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to ask. I mean, if you're used to flying... So there were 2 things that sort of stood out to me when I read about this in the book. The first was that if your HUD failed and you had you put the China graph marks on the HUD to allow you to still sort of aim the bombs. And the second was that there were 2 marks, and one of them was for you to be hunched down low, which I loved. I thought that was brilliant. Such great foresight. But so when you did it, then you know, because you've done it, how difficult it is to get that work up down from 250 to 200 and 150, 100, and then 50 for your guys in the Navy. How much more difficult is it then to go from the 50 to the 5 to 15 that you were talking about? Is that something that required conscious effort at that time?
It just seemed natural at the time with all the bullets and tracer and God knows what coming in your direction. It seems safer down low. The only problem is when you're down that low, all you can do is look ahead and judge your height. You can't look out of the side. You've got no tactical awareness at all. Even if no one's shooting at you, if you're over the sea flying down at 50 feet, you have to give all your concentration on not flying into the water. So tactically, it's not a desperately clever move unless there's a very good reason for it. It's bloody good fun though.
Did any of that footage, the HUD footage, did any of that survive?
I don't think it did. No. A lot of the time we were flying without cameras because there were a restricted number of cameras. And in fact, the one time that I had a camera that would have been interesting, I didn't turn it on.
The other question I was going to ask about that first raid was you talked through the book about previous near-death experience in Germany where you pulled up off of a target and were looking at your map to report back the coordinates of the target, and then when you popped your head up, you were diving at the ground and you pulled out but by the skin of your teeth, and you talked about a sort of delayed psychosomatic response to that later on. One of the things that is really quite sort of astounding, I think, to read about is that even after only the first week of combat, you're talking about being exhausted, physically, mentally, and within that first week, there are two Sea Harrier squadrons. There's those on the Invincible and those on the Hermes. There have been 3 Harriers lost and 3 pilots killed in the course of that first week, and I wondered then, having been hit, having had that very, I guess, surreal experience of looking at sand dunes and seeing people shooting down on you. And I think you mentioned in the book that you see a cow and it sort of lifts its head and stops chewing.
Yeah, that was Fred going in to attack Goose Green at the same time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I wonder then sort of what the emotional aspect is like then. How do you keep going?
People found their own different ways. I went to my cabin and wrote poetry, which helped ease some of the stresses that were happening. Other guys found different ways of doing it. But it was remarkable. The first week, I just got more and more exhausted. And then after probably 10 days, it plateaued and seemed to get easier. I guess the emotional side as well as the physical side really does take its toll. And as you say, we lost 3 guys in the first few days, and we only had 21 aircraft to start with. We knew we were up against somewhere around possibly 120, 140 fast jets.
You mentioned as well in that first week that you were running an intercept on a contact at sort of sea level. Could have been a ship, could have been a helicopter, and you talk about almost flying into the sea then. And that's what prompts you then to recall the story about Germany and the psychosomatic response you'd had. And I just thought, well, that sounds actually like not such a bad deal in comparison to the first mission where, all these things are happening and you get hit. But you sort of quite coolly talk about how you just sort of put it away as another learning experience. That is this an exposure thing? The more times this sort of thing happens to you, the less it affects you. I would have thought for most people it worked the other way around.
I think that's right. Certainly, when it comes to friends dying, you do get. Well, in those days, you tend to get inoculated against it because all the way through training and in normal frontline flying, you lose guys on a not necessarily monthly basis, but every year you'd have a dozen or so guys killed in just normal training. So from that point of view, you tend to be able to have a oh shit moment and then have a few beers and then get on with it.
If you enjoyed this clip and want more, you can go to 10percenttrue.com, hit subscribe, you get early ad-free access to all my content. Appreciate your support.